The air inside Metropolitan Market carried the faint sweetness of baked bread and citrus. I moved slowly through the aisles, choosing apples and pears for the fruit basket I planned to take to Rowan's house. A simple gift, but one I thought would ease the afternoon visit with Sarah's family across the Narrows. My pension never stretched far, yet I always tried to arrive with something in my hands. At the register, I set the basket down and searched my wallet for the right bills. The cashier, a man with graying hair and lines etched deep around his eyes, glanced at my card as I slid it across. He paused, his gaze lifted to me, sharper now, almost startled. "You're Car's mother, aren't you?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, surprised. "Yes, I'm Delphine Carr." Before I could add more, his hand closed gently but firmly around my wrist. The pressure startled me, but what truly shook me was the urgency in his eyes. He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a whisper that trembled with conviction. "They're not what they say," he murmured. "Her family always here, buying wine, meat, things most of us can't afford. Then I hear them talking about how much your son helps. Please, just watch." My throat tightened. For a moment, the beeping of the scanner and the chatter of other customers blurred into silence. I pulled back slightly, searching his face for any hint of malice, but found only concern, as if he carried the weight of something he could no longer keep quiet. He released my wrist and continued bagging groceries as though nothing had passed between us. I signed the receipt with a hand that trembled more than usual, slipped out through the side door, and found myself stepping into the gray Tacoma afternoon with a heart pounding faster than I cared to admit. I kept walking until the loading bay came into view, certain that whatever I saw next would either quiet my doubts or confirm the unease now lodged deep in my chest. The side door closed behind me, its metal frame thudding like a warning. I kept walking until I reached the back of the building, where delivery trucks idled and the air smelled of cardboard and damp asphalt. I pressed myself against the wall near a row of recycling bins, my fruit basket clutched against my chest as if it might shield me from what I didn't want to know. The parking lot stretched out just beyond the chain-link fence. I had only been standing there a minute when a pale SUV pulled in, the kind of car that gleams even in Tacoma's gray drizzle. The driver's door opened, and Martin Valmont stepped out, trim and polished. Not at all like the man Sarah described as struggling with reduced hours. He moved briskly to the back, popped the trunk, and lifted out 2 glossy black shopping bags stamped with the name of a high-end home store I had only ever admired from the sidewalk. The handles bent under the weight as he shifted them with practiced ease. I watched him place them inside the vehicle with a care that suggested they held more than just dishes or towels. Then his phone rang. He answered with a laugh, his voice carrying across the lot. "Yes, the season tickets are set. Lower level. I'll meet you next week." His tone was relaxed, the kind of ease I hadn't heard in Rowan's voice for months. I pressed my back harder against the wall. For weeks, Sarah had spoken of overdue bills, of her father's mounting medical expenses, of repairs they couldn't afford. Yet here he was, buying luxuries and planning outings. Martin closed the trunk, checked his reflection in the car window, and strolled back toward the store. I gripped the fruit basket tighter, unable to move, knowing that I had already seen more than I could explain away. And still, part of me needed to see more. So I stayed hidden as he disappeared through the sliding doors. Back in my apartment, I set the fruit basket on the counter untouched and sat down at the small table by the window. The rain had started, streaking the glass and blurring the view of the street below. I reached for the old ledger I've kept since Rowan was born, a habit from my years as a bookkeeper. Columns of numbers, penciled notes in the margins, and neat lines that never seemed to add up to enough. My pension check had come the week before, modest as always. I unfolded the bills I had set aside for groceries, medicine, utilities, counting them twice, then once more as if repetition might stretch them. I had managed to tuck away a few dollars in an envelope marked emergency, though lately those dollars had a way of slipping through my fingers. I thought of the years after my husband's accident, when Rowan was still a boy, and every cent depended on me. I worked long hours at the Marine Supply Office on Ruston Way, typing invoices by day and reconciling accounts by night. I packed peanut butter sandwiches in wax paper and skipped lunch myself, telling Rowan I'd already eaten. He never knew that I counted coins in my hand before stepping on the bus, weighing whether I could afford the ride. Those habits never left me. Even now, at 67, I tally everything: how many kilowatts I can use, how many pills I can afford from the pharmacy. And still, whenever Sarah called, her voice breaking over some new hardship, I found myself reaching into that envelope. A prescription not covered, a bill about to be cut off, rent overdue. Each time, I told myself it was just this once, that family comes first. Rowan inherited that same open hand. I raised him to be generous, to never turn away from need. I never imagined that generosity could become a weapon aimed back at him. I closed the ledger and rubbed my temples, the sound of the rain mixing with the echo of Martin's laughter. Tomorrow we were expected in Gig Harbor, and the weight of what I had seen pressed heavier than any sum on my page. The next afternoon, Rowan pulled up in his sedan, punctual as always. I carried the fruit basket to the car, careful not to let my thoughts show on my face. We crossed the Narrows Bridge, the steel arches rising above the water, and I watched the waves churn beneath as if they carried the same restlessness inside me. Rowan kept his eyes on the road, shoulders tense, though he filled the silence with small talk about a project at work. When we reached the Valmont's house in Gig Harbor, the first thing I noticed was the fresh paint on the siding. The last time I had been there, Sarah mentioned they were postponing repairs because of money troubles. Now the lawn was trimmed, flower beds lined with new bark, and the porch held a set of chairs that still smelled of varnish. Sarah greeted us at the door in a flowing blouse, her smile bright, her perfume delicate and costly. Come in, she said, ushering us toward the living room. The furniture was different, sleek leather sectional, polished glass table, and framed art that hadn't been there before. I touched the armrest lightly. It was new enough that the seams still felt stiff. Oh, these. Sarah laughed when she caught my glance. Employee discount at the store. Couldn't pass it up. In the dining room, trays of food covered the table: roasted salmon, asparagus, salads jeweled with pomegranate seeds, the kind of spread I'd seen at catered events, not family suppers. Martin appeared from the kitchen carrying wine glasses. Client points, he explained when I raised an eyebrow at the bottle's label. One of the perks of consulting. Every question had a neat answer, every luxury tied with a ribbon of explanation. Yet Rowan rubbed his temples more than once, as though the noise around him pressed too hard. He nodded at their stories but said little, his silence heavier than words. I forced myself to smile, to sit at their table, to take the plate Sarah offered, all the while my eyes cataloging every detail that told a different story. And later, when I returned home, I found proof arriving not in words, but in numbers. By the time I returned to my apartment, evening shadows were climbing the walls. I slipped off my shoes and lowered myself into the chair by the window. My phone buzzed on the table, screen lighting up with an unfamiliar number. For a moment, I hesitated, expecting a wrong call. But when I opened it, my breath caught. It was Eli. Somehow he had found my number and sent a series of photographs, Each image showed receipts from Metropolitan Market, imported seafood, French cheese, bottles of wine priced higher than my weekly grocery budget, and specialty cosmetics tucked between ordinary items. The totals ran into the hundreds, and one was dated just 2 days before Sarah had phoned Rowan, asking for help with the rent. My hand trembled as I scrolled. The ink on the receipt seemed to shout louder than any words. They were more than accusations, they were proof. Yet proof was heavy. I closed the phone, set it down, picked it back up again. To show Rowan meant risking everything between us. To keep silent meant watching him be bled dry. As I sat there, a knock rattled the door. It was Mina Calhoun from down the hall. A woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and a sharper memory. She had brought me a small tin of cookies. As we exchanged pleasantries, she leaned in, lowering her voice. "I saw your daughter-in-law at the Tacoma Mall last week. Cosmetics counter. The French store. Walked out with bags. My niece works there. Told me she's a regular." I forced a smile. Thanked her. But inside my chest, a cold knot tightened. Mina had no reason to invent such a detail. Her words aligned too perfectly with the receipts glowing on my phone. After she left, I sat in the quiet, the cookies untouched, the apartment filled with the sound of the clock ticking. I wanted to believe Sarah's stories, to imagine discounts and generous friends, but each piece of evidence stacked neatly against the other, like stones in a wall closing me in. I picked up the phone again and looked at the photos once more. The numbers stark and undeniable. Duty pressed on one side. Fear of losing my son pressed on the other. I knew I couldn't stay still forever. The next morning, I folded the photos into a plain envelope and placed it beside my ledger, ready for the conversation I dreaded most. And as I prepared, I told myself I would tread carefully, starting not with accusations but with questions. On Sunday, Rowan suggested a walk at Point Defiance, and I agreed, tucking the envelope with Eli's photos into my purse, though I wasn't sure I had the courage to open it. The air smelled of cedar and salt as we stepped beneath the towering firs. Gravel crunched under our shoes, and gulls called from somewhere near the water. I rehearsed the words in my head with every step. Too harsh, and he would close off. Too gentle, and he would brush it aside. Rowan looked tired, the kind of weariness that clings to the shoulders no matter how straight you stand. "You've been working late again," I said. He gave a small laugh. "Over time, it helps cover things Sarah's family can't manage right now. Dad's still struggling." The word stung. Struggling. I pictured Martin's polished shoes, his laugh about season tickets, the glossy bags swinging from his hand. I slipped my fingers over the envelope, but kept it inside my purse. "Rowan," I began carefully, "do you ever feel maybe you're carrying too much for them?" He stopped walking, studying me with the same eyes that once looked up from a crib, trusting me to soothe the world. "Mom, they're family. What would you have me do? Let them sink?" I swallowed hard. "No. Sometimes what we see doesn't always fit what we hear. And it worries me to see you so worn down." His jaw tightened, but his voice was steady. "Dad's health isn't good. Sarah worries constantly. I can handle extra hours. That's what husbands do." I nodded, though the knot in my chest grew tighter. He resumed walking, and I followed, my steps heavy. The envelope pressed against my side like a stone, its silence louder than any argument. I knew then that truth, however plain, would need more than words to reach him. And before long, evidence would come from somewhere he could not ignore. That evening, Rowan called, his voice low, asking if I could stop by the house. I heard the strain in his tone and agreed, though my heart tightened as I hung up. When I arrived, the lights were on, but the house felt hollow, as if something fragile had already cracked. Rowan met me at the door. Eyes shadowed. He didn't waste words. Instead, he guided me to the living room and set a small spiral notebook on the coffee table. "I found this," he said quietly. I sat down, my fingers brushing the cover. Inside were neat columns, each page dated, each line marked with a request rent due, medicine short, power bill urgent, alongside them. In the same careful hand, notes like, "Use guilt about Dad's illness," or remind him, "Family comes first." The amounts matched almost exactly the weeks I remembered Rowan working late or handing over cash. Before I could speak, Sarah appeared in the doorway, her tote bag still hanging from her shoulder. Her face flushed when she saw the notebook open. "That's private," she snapped, stepping forward. Rowan held up a hand. "Is it true?" His voice cracked on the last word. She blinked, then softened, her tone shifting. "It's just how I keep track of expenses. Nothing more. You're twisting it." When that failed, her voice rose, sharp with anger. "Your mother put this in your head. She's always hated me. She wants to ruin us." Rowan's shoulders stiffened. "The dates match every time you called me crying. Every time I worked extra hours. Every time Mom gave up part of her pension." His words fell heavy, each one landing like a blow neither of us wanted to deliver. Sarah's lips parted, but no excuses came. The silence in the room was louder than her denial. Rowan closed the notebook with a finality that made me shiver. "We're meeting tomorrow," he said. His eyes on me now. "All of us. I need to hear the truth out loud." The next afternoon, Rowan asked me to meet him by the waterfront on Ruston Way. The sky was a muted silver, the sound restless with whitecaps, gulls wheeling overhead. We sat at an outdoor table near a cafe, the kind of place where Rowan and I had shared simpler days, and waited. Sarah arrived first, her steps quick, her smile tight. Martin followed moments later, jacket pressed, shoes polished, as though presentation alone could erase the weight of what we knew. Rowan didn't waste time. He placed the spiral notebook and a stack of receipts on the table, anchoring them against the wind. Sarah's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Where did you get those?" she demanded. "You left them in your bag," Rowan said evenly. "I just want the truth." She laughed, brittle. "That's nothing. Notes. Lists. You're making them into something they're not." When Rowan didn't move, her tone sharpened. "This is your mother's doing, isn't it? She's never accepted me. She's poisoning you against your own wife." Martin leaned forward, voice calm but dismissive. "Son, you don't understand. Families help each other. We've all had to lean on one another. That's not manipulation. It's survival." Rowan's jaw tightened. Survival doesn't look like champagne, new cars, and season tickets. He tapped the receipts with his finger. "These line up with every emergency you told me about. Rent, medicine, power bills, all lies." Sarah's mask cracked. Her eyes flashed with anger. "We needed security. Rowan, you would never have helped us if you thought we were doing fine. Don't you see? We counted on your loyalty because we trusted you." It was Martin who ended the charade. He exhaled slowly, leaned back, and smiled without warmth. "It's not personal. It's just business. You've been reliable. We made use of that." For a long moment, the only sound was the water lapping against the seawall. Rowan's hands shook as he closed the notebook, his face pale but resolute. "Not anymore," he said. His voice carried the weight of finality. He gathered the papers, stood, and left them staring after him. I followed, my steps heavy, knowing the next move would cut deeper still. The following week, Rowan asked me to come with him to an attorney's office downtown. The building overlooked Pacific Avenue, its brick facade worn with years of stories. Inside, the attorney explained the steps clearly: freeze transfers, close joint accounts, file the first papers for separation. Rowan listened without interruption, his hands clasped tightly on the table, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and quiet determination. When the papers were signed, I felt the weight shift in the room. It was not freedom yet, but the first real boundary he had drawn for himself in years. As we walked out, the air smelled faintly of rain, and I thought of the countless nights he had stayed up working overtime, believing his efforts kept another household afloat. That chapter was closing. Martin tried one last time. He called Rowan's phone as we drove away, his tone smooth, asking for a bridge loan until some supposed check arrived. Rowan put him on speaker, his voice steady as he replied, "No more. Martin, it ends here." The silence on the other end was brief before the line cut off. That night, Rowan came to my apartment. He pulled my spare key from his pocket, the one I had given him years ago when he first married. "You should have this back," he said. Then he reached into his other pocket and placed a different key in my hand. "For my place. I want you to know you're welcome, but on my terms now." I closed my fingers around it, the cold metal warming quickly against my palm. It wasn't just a key. It was a promise that he had chosen dignity over deception, and as I held it, I realized the choice had also become mine. By summer, Rowan had settled into a modest rental near Wright Park, the kind of place where sunlight filtered through tall windows and the sound of children carried from the playground. He looked healthier than I had seen in years. The dark circles had faded. His laugh returned in fragments, and the constant tension in his shoulders began to ease. He spoke of saving again, of planning for his own future, instead of patching someone else's. I, too, began to rebuild. At my kitchen table, I rewrote my will, naming Rowan as executor, but also setting aside a small fund through a Tacoma nonprofit that supports elder abuse prevention. It was a quiet act, but it gave me peace to know my own story might help shield others. Each evening, when I turned the plain steel key in my apartment door, I felt the shift inside me. I wore it on a chain around my neck, not for show, but as a reminder. That key was more than metal. It was a line drawn, a boundary kept. Rowan visited often, sometimes with takeout containers, sometimes just to sit with me while the park lights glowed across the street. We spoke less of Sarah and Martin as the months passed, their names losing power in silence. In their absence, space returned for trust rebuilt, for dignity restored, for love tested and proven. And as I locked the door each night, I knew the watch I kept now was not against the world, but for the life I still had left to claim.